Welcome to my updated bookshelves tour. So this is such a classic video. I've been filming these for almost a decade now. You can go back and see my bookshelves when I was in my flats at university during my undergrad. I have bookshelf tours of the rooms in my mum's home. I have bookshelf tours of my flat in London, and now I'm actually in my very own flat. So I own this flat with a mortgage alongside one of my best friends in the whole world. We bought it together earlier this year, and we are both massive readers. So there's books everywhere in this house. Bedrooms, hallways, the communal space, which is both the living room and the kitchen. And if we had anywhere else to put them, there'd be books there too, to be honest. I have still got some books at my mum's house because there's not exactly space for them here, and I know Jill definitely has some books at her parents' home as well, but most of my books are here, and for that reason I thought it would be interesting to take a little tour of all the bookcases in the flat where I have books. So I'm not going to be invading Jill's room and showing you her bookcases because that's obviously her personal space. I will be showing you all the bookcases in my bedroom and in the shared spaces. Now, it is predominantly my books which are in the shared spaces, only because when we moved in we agreed that Jill could have the larger bedroom with the ensuite bathroom, and that means she has more space for bookcases in her bedroom, and I couldn't fit as much of my stuff in my own bedroom, which is fine by me because I also use the living room as a workspace. It's where I have my desk, so it's nice to be surrounded by books. So as we go through, I will show you the different bookcases and talk about the shelves that are mine, and maybe briefly mention some of the shelves where Jill has her books as well, but I can't obviously go into as much detail because they're not my books, so I don't have any stories behind them or any thoughts on them necessarily, but you'll get to see kind of how we've dotted everything around. And I guess with that said, I should just jump in with the bookshelves tour, right? Like, what else do you say to introduce a video like this? So it seems only natural to start with the books that were actually behind me in the introduction to this video, which live in this old glass cabinet. I think it's meant to be like for drinks and glasses and things like that, and if I'm being perfectly honest, this right here has gin in it. So it is getting used for its purpose somewhat, but this was a hand-me-down from a good family friend to me when Jill and I moved into this flat when we were looking for bits of furniture, and we decided to use it for a mix of sort of like antique or more special books, as well as where I keep all of my ancient classics, my ancient history, Greek and Roman predominantly, some Egyptian as well, basically because then they were easy access for me in the lounge when I was working at my desk. So let's have a little close-up look. So if I start up at the very top, this is actually where Jill and I have popped our Folio Society books, and I'm now realising one of them is upside down. Let me know if you can spot which one it is. Most of these are mine, apart from two. So the two at this end here, this one and this one, both belong to Jill. The rest are then all mine, and they were all second-hand purchases. Or gifts, but again second-hand, except for one. So The Little White Horse is the only Folio Society book I've ever bought new, because it was one of my favourite childhood books, and there used to be a Folio Society shop in London, so when I paid that shop a visit I couldn't resist picking up what was a childhood favourite. So this is what this one looks like, and it's definitely in slightly better condition than some of the others because it was bought new, but they are very expensive Folio Society edition books. There are some illustrations in here, yeah, here they are. So that's what that looks like inside, and I do treasure this. This is a very treasured book of mine. But that's not to say I don't treasure the rest of the books in the Folio Society editions I own just because they were second hand. In fact, a lot of them have a lot of really special memories for me. The Railway Children was one I just found myself second hand, the same with The Invention of the Middle Ages. Short Stories from the Strand I actually bought way back when my friend Jen used to work in a second-hand bookshop called Ripping Yarns, and I came across it when I was browsing in there on a visit to her, and I picked that up because The Strand is the magazine where Sherlock Holmes was originally published, and I'm a massive Sherlock Holmes nerd. We then have the Greek myths, which I actually technically own too, copies of this, although only one are in their slipcase. So these are by Robert Graves and they look like this on the inside. These are my editions, which were a gift for university when I started as a like celebration from Diane, who's actually the same person who handed me down this old glass cabinet that belonged to her mum. But my dad did have a copy of these too, so technically I own another set that aren't in their slipcase. This is not Folio Society, it's just in there. It's my Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. We have Robert Graves's The Golden Fleece, so the same author as the Greek myths here. This is one of my favourites because it's just so beautiful. This is what it looks like inside, and some of the illustrations, I mean, can you even? These are just gorgeous works of art. These are not the original ancient texts, but Robert Graves' interpretation of them in both incidents. That one again was a gift, as were, I believe, yes, all of the next 4. So we have Kenneth Grahame's Dream Days. So Kenneth Grahame is a Scottish children's author who wrote The Wind in the Willows. This was a gift from my partner, as was Ovid's The Art of Love. This is quite a large edition, which looks like that inside. And similarly, my flatmate Jill actually gifted me Ovid's Ars Amatoria in this smaller Folio Society edition, so like a different iteration of Ovid's work by Folio with different illustrations. It's got these lovely little illustrations between the text, which I love, so these are really special. And then lastly, for my partner, I have The Rise and Fall of Athens by Plutarch. So these are all ancient works, and the ones that were gifts from, and The Rise and Fall of Athens, as well as the Ovid from my partner, were gifts for when I completed my PhD, which was super special. Then right next to that, over here, we have my Puffin Penguin Children's Classics series, which I just love. These are really, really beautiful little books. If I take you to a close-up of the spines there, we have Pride and Prejudice, Heidi, Little Women, Anne of Green Gables, Railway Children, Little Princess. Again, I'm not really sure Pride and Prejudice is a children's book, but they included it in this collection, so there we go. I love those, they're so beautiful. And then the 2 cocktail books I own. We do have a separate cookbook selection, but these are the 2 cocktail books I own. I have one which is specifically gin cocktails and one which is cocktails around the world, which was a gift from Leanne and Harry. And then we come down to the glass cabinet itself. Sorry if there's a reflection here. I'll move the glass panels along there for starters. These books here are all ancient literature in a collected series. We have, for example, Plutarch, we also have Tacitus, Suetonius, Livy, Homer, etc. And these belong to my dad, but they're obviously mine now. And then we have my lovely hardback editions of Robin Hobb's work. So I only have the Ship of Magic and the Mad Ship, so these are both part of the Live Ship Traders series, and I just love them, but they're pretty old and fragile, so I thought they should go in the glass cabinet. Similarly, we have some more sort of antique books. I have Once Upon a Time children's stories from the classics. These are very old retellings of Greek myths by Blanche Welder, and I also have some of Nathaniel Hawthorne's Tanglewood Tales, which are retellings of myths again. So they're sort of like antique books. Then if I move you along here, we actually have some of Jill's antique books. So these are some like precious books to Jill that she wanted to keep in the glass cabinet. I then have these Penguins Myths collections, and then we have a selection predominantly of Lord of the Rings related books, which are actually all Jill's but one. This is mine, but everything else here is Jill's, so I won't go into too much detail there. She's the big Lord of the Rings fan in this house, although some of these are like lovely little antique books, like this lovely old edition of Tom Bombadil, which I think I will get out because you might like to see. And I was with Jill when she bought this book. I was the one that spotted it in a charity shop and knew that she would want to buy it, which she did. So this is the lovely edition of the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is obviously quite special. Then moving further down, I won't go into too much detail here, but we basically have a lot of my classical texts, if not all of my classical texts. Oh look, there's my reflection. So I've got Penguin editions and Oxford Classics editions. You know, I have Greek, Roman, a couple of Egyptian in there, but mainly Greek and Roman, because that is what is most easily accessible. And that carries on into the shelf below, but in mixed editions. So these are all mine, but they're not like in the same editions as above. We have some older Penguin classics, we have some other translations and editions. I then have some medieval literature here like Reynard the Fox. These 3 books here all belong to Jill, as do all of these travel books here. These are more of my ancient classics, and then just over here we have my collection of Shakespeare plays. So these are my favourite little Shakespeare editions. I just love the artwork on them, but they're out of print now, so I'm basically collecting them up second hand whenever I see them for reasonable prices. Let me just show you a couple here. So that's Romeo and Juliet, so that's where the collection's at so far. And that's basically what's going on here on this glass cabinet. Sorry about the light reflection, there is no natural light in this flat right now. We do have some more books in the living room kitchen area. Over there is cookbooks along with cooking stuff, which I'll do a brief overview of, and then we have this larger IKEA white bookcase which hosts a ton of my books, and I think you can see some of my laundry there in the corner. So let's do a big overview here. This is, like I mentioned, an IKEA bookcase that we keep in the living room, and it is again predominantly my books. It's where I keep all of my generic read fiction that I have enjoyed enough to keep physical copies of, and then Jill has popped some overflow books of hers on there. So this entire bottom shelf is Jill's. We then have a small selection of Jill's books here, these 4, and then the rest are all mine. So as I mentioned, these are all books I've read and enjoyed. I'll just do a quick pass over them so you can see them. So there's maybe a couple of books in here that I didn't love as much but have wanted to keep for one reason or another, but predominantly these are books I'm like, these are great, I want to maybe reread, I want to recommend, I want to lend to friends, or by authors I love and I want to keep around. So I'm quite brutal with the books I read and whether I keep them or not, so that's why this bookcase isn't huge. But in saying that, I do have other books I've read elsewhere, including like folktale and fairy tale books, which are in my bedroom, and non-fiction, short stories and poetry, which are predominantly at my mum's house right now, so that's some more books there. Then we have a few more books on this shelf. I mean, sorry, there are things on these bookcases as well, so they may be getting in the way slightly. Shall I move Bridget? There we go. You can get an idea. These are all books you may have heard me mention before because they're books that I really, really like. So yeah, that's what those look like. Got a Cattle Witch back there. We've got some more fiction here. We've got my microphone, we've got candles, etc, etc. Then up here we have my Loeb collection. So Loebs are published by Harvard University Press, and they're basically editions of the ancient texts, ancient Greek and Roman texts, either in Latin, which are the red volumes, or Greek, which are the green volumes that include the original Greek or Latin text and a translation. Then we have all of my lovely Nicholas Skinner hardback children's books, which I just love, so they get to be separate. I mean, look how beautiful these are. I love them. My Mirror Visitors series, which I really need to get the 4th one in hardback of, and my Emperor of the Eight Isles and Lord of the Darkwood series by Leanne Hearn. These are again just beautiful hardbacks, which I decided to pop up here. Then for anyone who is interested, here are our cookbooks. Again, a mishmash of Jill and I's. These are all Jill's. These are almost all Jill's minus Naomi Smart, which is mine. Pretty much any vegan or vegetarian book on this shelf is mine. Jill obviously really likes the Pinch of Noms. She's got the whole series there. I've not tried them. Going down here we put our books which are sort of focused on different parts of the world together, so like cuisine from different parts of the world. The Dishoom book, which Jill and I actually both have a copy of, so I left mine with my mum to use while we live together because obviously we only need one. Jill's Polska book, Dumplings and Noodles is Jill's, so is Recipes of Tolkien. Rosa's Thai Cafe is mine, Veggie Chinese is mine, Bazaar is mine, and Natural Flava is mine. So that's a mishmash of our books. Then beneath that shelf we have predominantly my veggie and vegan cookbooks, minus Jill's Stanley Tucci book. I mean, it does all get mishmashed about, doesn't it? Especially cookbooks, which you're pulling in and out a lot. But this is my favourite series of cookbooks right here. The 15-minute vegan books are incredible. Love, love, love those. Also the Green Roasting Tin, another favourite. Adore. Mildred's is one of my favourite veggie restaurants. The tofu cookbook is actually fantastic. If you like tofu, this is made by the brand Tofu, who make tofu and tempeh, and I love that cookbook. So yeah, those are Jill and I's cookbooks with a mishmash of other kitchen stuff. A lot of chickens because Jill's a big chicken fan. Then lastly, for the lounge, we have this bookcase, which is entirely my books, and it's a TBR bookcase, predominantly of sci-fi and fantasy. There are some books that have got mixed around between bookcases, but that's what this was intended to be, my sci-fi and fantasy TBR shelf. And also we have Jill's Seven Dwarves statue up there, plus some classics which aren't to be read. But the bookcase itself is where I've popped all of my sci-fi and fantasy, and occasionally some other things that have got muddled in there that I still need to read. And there's a lot of this. I've mentioned before that I'm pretty brutal with the books I keep that I've read, but it does mean I have a lot of books I haven't read yet, either that I've bought myself or been sent by publishers, what have you, and you will see that there are still 2 further TBR bookcases in this house of my books. So for starters, we have my Jane Austens and my Virginia Woolf's collections up here. These are the vintage editions, which I love. So that's some of the Virginia Woolf ones, and you may have seen the Penguin ones before. I really, really love these editions. Then moving down to the shelves themselves, I'll just do a little bit of a pan over each shelf, and you'll basically get to see most of the sci-fi and fantasy that's currently on my TBR. Some of these books I've had for far too long, some have only recently been added, but there you go. It's nice living in a library, isn't it? You've got lots to pick from, so I'm not complaining. Jill has read some of these as well, because we do pick books from each other's shelves, but I haven't. So these are unread books for me, which I am excited to get to, and if you think I should pick up any of them ASAP, let me know. So now we are in my hallway, which isn't a massive hallway, but we did find space for one 3-shelf bookcase from IKEA, which we also dump letters and keys, etc. above. So that's what's going on up there. We'll not show you that mess, but these are shared bookcases. The entire top bookcase is Jill's, so we'll not go into detail about those books. We then have a couple of Jill's books on the second shelf, which are the Emperor Nero books, and then the rest are mine. And I haven't read them. These are TBR books once again, but they are my hardback. So yeah, basically what you're getting here is my hardback TBR. So we have everything from sci-fi to fantasy to thrillers to contemporary to romance to adult YA, a little bit of children's I think, and a few larger print paperback proofs. So a couple of these aren't hardbacks, but they're like larger print, which means that they take up a bit more space. And I'm just going to pan again so you can give me an idea of what you think I should read next. We've actually got a gap here. What's this? Space for more books? Oh no. Obviously bookcase needs reshuffled as you read more, add more, whatever. But these are all books that I need to get to. What can I say? I have a lot of TBR books, so yeah, these are in the hallway, and it is terrible because it's in the hallway. It's the bookshelf I forget about the most, so I'm always the least likely to pick books off this shelf, which is atrocious because a lot of them sound fantastic. So let me know if there's any I should read and I'll pick it up next. Now we come to my bedroom, where I have 3 separate bookcases, some of which are more than for just books, and I'm going to take you through each of those. Now, if you'd like a full bedroom tour, I do have one on my channel already that I'll link down below, but specifically, oh, a little drop there, specifically this bookcase didn't exist back then. This has been an add-on, but I did have this, which I think had less on it, and another bookcase, which I'm going to show you in a second. So this bookcase is a ladder bookcase, which I actually got from Habitat via Argos, and I use it for a mishmash of books and other bits and pieces. So it's got like some candles and ornaments and magazines, etc. on it, and I'll go through each shelf a little bit and show you each one, but I also specifically focus it on my books on mythology and folklore and on my comic books and graphic novels. So let's look at the top first. So on this top shelf we clearly have more knickknacks than books, but there are 4 books here which are just quite special and I like to keep here somewhere, which they're, you know, close by. They were all from my dad's bookcases. 3 of them are of course collections of myths. We have the Epic of Gilgamesh, some myths from Mesopotamia, and a Celtic miscellany which collects together a bunch of different Celtic myths, and then I have the poetry of Percy Shelley in this really old little maybe leather bound copy. I'm not 100% sure if it's actually leather or not, but this belonged to my dad, and it's just a really special little book because Percy Shelley was his favourite poet, and I read one of the poems from this collection at his funeral, so that book means a lot to me, and I just like to have it nearby on this shelf where I kind of keep special things. Then if we move down, oh, you might be able to see me there, hi, to the second shelf, we have another mishmash of things, many of which are not books, but the first kind of book adjacent item are my issues of Hellebore. So Hellebore is my favourite magazine. This is one of the issues here. It is a magazine specialising in British folk horror, and it basically looks at literature, historical sites, sort of kind of strange things that have happened in British history, places you can visit, practices, traditional practices, folk practices, etc., depending on whatever the different writers are focusing on that issue. And I adore this magazine. It's introduced me to some really interesting scholars that I've then followed, as well as some fun, interesting tidbits about British folk history and British folk horror. So I really love that magazine. I also have an issue of Cunning Folk, which I haven't read as much of, but do really enjoy. This one specialises in like sort of fairy tale and mythology, but it's also short stories, not just non-fiction. Then we have some knickknacks and my collection of wooden books, which aren't obviously made of wood. They are published by Wooden Books, these little individual issues, and they are books on, again, super niche little topics, often related to different aspects of folklore, myth, religion, sort of the esoteric. So like I've got rhetoric, the miracle of trees, ley lines, Callanish, which is a very specific collection of standing stones in Scotland, proverbs, dragons, grammar, poetic metre, a bit of everything. Okay, now that I have messed up my bookcase arrangement, here are what the wooden books look like. This is Sacred Springs by Christina Martin. So these are all by different authors on specialist topics, and they're really beautifully printed with these lovely like lino cut illustrations inside. That's maybe not lino cut, some of them are lino cut, some of them aren't, but they're just like really beautifully put together books. They're very sustainable in their practices as a publisher, and I really, really adore each book in this series. There's still some more that I want to pick up, but yeah, that's the collection that I have so far. The next shelf has a mishmash again of some crystals and some books on like the esoteric and witchcraft and folklore. So for example, we have a history of witchcraft, which is a more academic book about the history of witchcraft. We then have a book on Scottish witchcraft, we have a book on queering the tarot, we have a book on secret games of the gods, which sort of looks at like the esoteric and paranormal history of like games. Sorry, I just nudged you there. We also have a few different like approaches to the like sort of art of tarot. We've got some collections of fairy tales and folk tales about witches, and then we also have Occult Britain, which actually I want to show you more in detail. So this is Occult Britain, and it's actually published by Hellebore, so the same people that published the magazine I just showed you, and it's actually like a tourism guide to interesting folklore related or pagan related sites in Britain and the history around them. It's really, really cool. It looks at both like their interpretation by modern pagan practitioners, some which have had sort of ghost stories arise around them, as well as their like historical importance, and you can kind of look up any part of Britain and find some interesting sites to visit. I really, really love this book. I've made sure to visit a couple of things I hadn't heard of in here before, and there's so many more I want to check out. So yeah, if you're looking for like a slightly offbeat tourist guide to Britain, this is well worth checking out. Then if we come to the next shelf down, we get our first glimpse into my doll collection with one of my Bratz dolls there. I do enjoy collecting dolls as well as books, so you'll see a few of those on the next bookcase because that's where I keep them. And alongside this is basically my shelf of miscellaneous myth, folklore and like tangentially related books. There's some books on here that aren't necessarily myth or folklore, but I just plopped on here, but most of them are like history books and books on like folklore and pagan practices and pieces of ancient literature from different cultures that aren't Greek and Roman like the ones I showed you already, because as much as I love my Greek and Roman mythology, I am just very, very interested in the history of like folk practices and different religious beliefs around the world. It's something I've always enjoyed reading about and learning about. So this is some of those there, as well as some retellings by other authors in collections. For example, I have Angela Carter's Book of Fairy Tales, which are just fairy tales by Angela Carter, inspired by fairy tales from other older writers, and I just love this edition. We then have like a bunch of different things. So I have like the Flame Tree Press's collection of Persian myths. I have a book on Chinese fairy tales and legends, which my lovely friend Tasmin actually gifted me. Oh, that's a terrible view of that book. It's way too close up, but yeah, that's what that looks like. I have a book which is upside down, because apparently that is something I do a lot, as we're discovering as we go along. This is a book by Lilith Dorsey, who is both a practitioner and a scholar in African diaspora practices and orishas. So this is on different orishas, goddesses and voodoo queens. We've got a Celtic reader, which, oh, I love the cover of this. This is a really old book I got in a second-hand shop, but it basically brings together different texts on the Celts from different people. So there's like Roman texts on the Celts in here, there's Celtic texts, there's texts from lots of different places that have sort of given us information about the Celts. The Book of Barely Imagined Beings isn't actually on folklore, but it feels like it should be here. This is actually about real animals and creatures in our world, but that feels so strange they could be mythical. So that's a lot of fun. We then have some like collections of folk tales. We have short story collections which bring together different women writers, like not necessarily folk tales themselves. We have some of the original Mulan stories. Sorry, I keep knocking my D&D dice, which are there. So yeah, these are my D&D dice. So this translates a few different of the early versions of the Mulan story, which is really fantastic. We also have my own book, because apparently I've decided to put it in the section, I guess just because like obviously it means a lot to me. This is the first copy I got of my own fantasy novel, and it's like just kind of special, so it goes in there. As you can tell, perhaps this bookshelf specifically is arranged by colour. I just tried to keep it in a sort of like colour arrangement for no particular reason other than I thought it looked cute. Behind my little fairy door there, we've got some more like Brothers Grimm. We've got some like collections of Hindu myths. We've got some Finnish mythology, Welsh mythology, all in the Oxford Classics editions. And moving on to the bottom shelf, we have a completely different subgenre really of literature, which is comic books and graphic novels. Sorry about pulling on the cord there. So these are the physical copies of the comic books I own, and a few graphic novels as well. So like for example Black Magic, Harleen, which is an origin story of Harley Quinn. So this is like a one shot which yeah, is Harley Quinn's origin story. We've then got various volumes of some of my favourite comic books like Giant Days, By Night, Lumberjanes, Moonstruck, Chew. Some that I haven't read yet, but I'm really, really excited to, like Zodiac Star Force and The Backstagers and Misfit City, all of which sound fantastic. Cannot wait to read them. We have my Kay O'Neill graphic novels like The Tea Dragon Society, which is such a cute, cosy comic book graphic novel for all ages. Love, love, love Kay's books. A few more bits and pieces. Emily Carroll, who writes horror graphic novels, so again, love these, really, really beautiful. My Isabel Greenberg books, who is one of my favourite graphic novelists. Isabel Greenberg's art is just phenomenal. Absolutely adore it. And then we have some more of my books, as well as a book by Matt Ralph, because these here are the DK Myth series. So if you don't know, I published this book Greek Myths with DK back in 2020, which is illustrated by Katie Ponder. It's a children's introduction to Greek mythology. This is what some of the artwork looks like inside, and it's part of an ongoing series which includes Norse myths, which was written by Matt Ralphs, Egyptian myths, which was also written by myself. So this was the most recent one in the series, and I loved writing this. And then I also own Greek myths in French. I would really love to own all of the different translations of Greek and Egyptian myths, just because it's incredible. It feels so cool to have your work translated into other languages. But I decided to start with French because it's one of the languages I actually know a little of, having studied it. So, you know, I can read like little bits and pieces of this. But over time I would really, really like to collect up all of them. So yeah, I'm also really excited because come next year there'll be another book in this series by me, which is Goddesses and Heroines, and this shelf will have to make some space. And with that we move to the bookcase that was added to this room since I did my actual bedroom tour. Basically I needed more space for books, and as you can see, dolls. So this is where I keep a lot of my doll collection. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But there are, yeah, a ton of dolls also on this bookcase. It's a kind of multifunctional bookcase, but we're here for the books, so let's have a look at those. First up we have some of my bigger hardback books, again sort of on these sort of like folklore and mythology topics, but some other bits and pieces as well. The Encyclopedia of Witches and Witchcraft, the Encyclopedia of Fairies, we've got a book on the Gothic throughout media, we've got the complete book of Flower Fairies, which is a collection of poem and artwork, Nordic Tales published by Chronicle Books, Jessie Burton's retelling of Medusa, Herons of Olympus by Ellie Macken, who is an incredible scholar, and Warriors, Witches and Women by Kate Hodges. Then behind my little Funko Pop pony there we have two of the Flame Tree collections of myths and legends, one of Scottish folk and fairy tales and one of African myths and legends. If you're interested, I'll just show you what these look like. They're really lovely, lovely books. I just knocked a little pony over, but whatever. So really like them, and these are just a little bit bigger, so I have them stacked on top of each other. Then moving down, we basically have all of my Penguin collections of folk tales, fairy tales, and ancient literature from different cultures. So like, there's a bunch of different stuff here. I've got some Norse myths, I've got some African mythology, I've got some Hindu legends, I've got some Russian folktales, I've got the Penguin Book of Witches, the Penguin Book of Mermaids, I've got some Arabic literature, I've got some like ghost stories as well, a lot of different stuff. And then behind these, because some of these bookcases are double stacked just for space's sake, let me move that. So behind those we actually have some of my middle grade children's books. So these are all generally middle grade children's books that I've already read and really enjoyed, and just needed to put away somewhere. So as you can see, like, I've got the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. I've got a few other books in there too, but I'm not going to unstack everything to show you. It's just not worth it. Some YA as well, but basically more books that I've read that are for younger readers, and needed somewhere to go. Then on the next shelf, if we remove all of my LOL dolls, we have retellings of mythology, predominantly Greek and Roman, but not entirely Greek and Roman. So we've got like Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman, we've got Pat Barker's books, Madeline Miller's books, we've got Sister Song by Lucy Holland, which is a retelling of British folklore, we've got Daughter of the Moon Goddess, which is a retelling of Chinese mythology, but other than that these are all Greek and Roman. They're just effectively hardbacks, because basically underneath this, on the next two shelves, we have all of my other retellings of myths and fairy tales. So again, this one is home to a few dolls, and if we get rid of the dolls, this is what we've got on this shelf. This one isn't actually retellings, I should say, but the next one is. So this bookcase has all of my Oxford Very Short Introduction. So this is such a fantastic series. Really fantastic little books by different academics on topics that give you a great introduction to both the specific topic but also like the history of the study of that topic, if that makes sense. So like, for example, if you look at the classical mythology one by Helen Morales, which is one of my favourite, it both looks at like some of the basics to understanding classical mythology of the Greeks and Romans, but also like kind of how that discipline has been approached for centuries, and I really love these books. So I've got a few of them, as you can see. Then behind those I have my collection of Pantheon myths. So these Pantheon books are fantastic if you're looking for collections that have been well sourced and well edited of different cultures, myths and folk tales, because they're generally like either recorded from oral versions of people from those cultures, or using like historical texts from these people. So I've got a few different books in this collection that I really love. I'd love to get more of them. And then we have my little books in the Thames and Hudson myths collection. So for example, this is the Japanese myths book from Thames and Hudson. There's also the Celtic myths, the Egyptian myths, and the Greek and Roman myths. Then these are my illustrated editions by Camille Rose Garcia, who I just love. I love her artwork. It's so dark dark and weird and fabulous. This is one of the pages inside, for example, and as you can see I have the illustrated Cinderella, I have the illustrated Snow White, and the illustrated Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Okay, the next shelf is of retellings. So this is basically a double stacked bookcase of myth and fairy tale retellings, some of which I've read, some of which I haven't. I think I've read more than 50% of these, and we've got a little bit of everything, from retellings of Beauty and the Beast, to retellings of Tristan and Isolde, to retellings of Antigone, to Cinderella, to Cassandra, to more Beauty and the Beast, to Hindu mythology. And like I said, this is double stacked, so it's a bit of a pain actually trying to show these kind of bookcases, but we've got some more in there, and it's generally the same kind of vibe. Retellings of myths and fairy tales, or occasionally like books inspired by antiquity. So that Tom Hope book isn't actually necessarily a retelling, but it is inspired by and set in antiquity. So that's what's on that shelf. And then lastly, Bratz dolls. No, that's not what you came here to see? Okay, let's take them away. Okay, so despite the fact that these books are on the bottom shelf of my bookcase, they're actually some of my favourite books in my collection and one of my favourite collections of books, because these, my friends, are my mass market paperbacks. So I'm a sucker for a mass market paperback. Like these, kind of like very stereotypically like 70s, 80s book designs, where there are these kind of chunkier styles. They're smaller than a regular paperback. They usually end up being quite chunky width-wise as well because of how short they are, and they're very heavily associated with like sci-fi and fantasy, although you do get thrillers and romance in these types of books as well. And they're less common these days than they used to be, but you do still get them for some books, like with these Juliet Marillers, and I love them. Like, I just love them. I often find they have the most fun artwork, and I basically love to collect them. So we have some which I bought new, like the Juliet Marillers, but a lot of them I bought second hand because that's how they're easier to find. So like I pick these up whenever I'm in charity shops, like mass market sci-fi and fantasy. Here we have Jan Siegel. Oh, this one here is a fantastic old one. This is Catherine Kurtz's Derny Rising. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right actually, but love these covers. Like I just love them. They're so beautiful and they're so very much of a specific style, and I typically find that I enjoy the books within them. Like, there is something to be said for book cover design being able to indicate to you whether this is the kind of book you'll like. And I find I love books with these kind of very heavily illustrated fantasy covers. Here's another favourite. This is Fires of the Faithful, which is actually a queer sapphic fantasy by Naomi Kritzer. Love that. And I have those double stacked, so yeah. I might do a whole TikTok where I show you in depth every single book in this collection because I love my mass market paperbacks. And with that, we come to the final bookcase in my bedroom. So if you saw my bookshelf tour, if you saw my bedroom tour, then you may have seen in that, I think this was here when I did that, this bookcase, which is basically stuffed down the side of my bed. So I have my clothing rail here. I have a gallery wall, and then I have this bookcase which just slotted in really nicely. There's only a tiny bit of floor space there, but it was fantastic for me because it meant I had somewhere to put more of my TBR books, because that's what these are, gang. We looked at my sci-fi and fantasy TBR before. This generally is my TBR in terms of contemporary books, literary fiction, and romance. And thrillers. Okay, so yeah, thrillers, contemporary romance, and literary fiction is all mishmashed in here. I obviously can't say a terrible amount. About each book because I haven't read them, but I am very excited to read each of them. They all sound fantastic. I've picked them up for good reason, I think. Some of them have been recommended by friends, and I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty difficult to show you this bookcase because it is stuffed down the side of my bed, but you know, you got to make use of all of the space that you have, right? The only question is, how am I going to show you this very bottom shelf? Okay, I think this is the best angle we're going to get without me literally moving my entire bed frame. So here are the books on the bottom shelf here. I'm really sorry, this is not very professional, is it? But hey ho, using my space, Tetris style. And before you ask, yes, there are a few books on top here along with some of my hairstyling stuff. We have my collection of like Lord of the Rings related books. Like these are all books by our J.R.R. Tolkien in this lovely like box set that they were released in with these lovely illustrations, which I adore. Like, the box set itself is just gorgeous. Look at that design. We have my Rebels Guide to, which are a series published by Bookmarks Bookshop in London, and they're all biographies of different like radical activists from history. So we have like Karl Marx, we have James Connolly, we have Alexandra Kollontai, etc, etc. Love these little books. We have 2 random Switch games, which are the only 2 Switch games I own physical copies of, because why not? We own some of my little Penguin, I have a few little Penguin classics, and then I have my physical copies of the 404 Inkling series. So I love these books. They're little non-fiction books on super niche topics, which are just fantastic. So that's on Schitt's Creek, this is on Transmasculine Joy, and this is on the experience of adoptees. I'm now realising how dusty this mirror is, so please excuse that because I hadn't checked beforehand, but I thought I would just say bye face to face since we've looked at all of my bookcases. I know it's been a little bit of a mishmash of things across the house and some odd angles, but hopefully you enjoyed just like getting that little insight of how I organise and store all of my books. If you'd like to ask any more specific questions about the books themselves that maybe you got a glimpse of but I didn't say anything about, then just let me know in the comments and I will be happy to answer. I'll also link, like I said, my room tour down below, as well as like any other useful videos, maybe some of my past bookshelf tours where they were easier to see. So I hope you otherwise enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all again in the next one. Bye everyone! Oh my goodness, how could I forget? There's one more bookcase that I have. This is my floating bookshelf, which actually is located above my clothing rack, so like right up next to the ceiling, and it's one of those ones which allows you to make it look like the books are literally floating because it slots into the book itself. And I effectively just have like my Canongate myth retellings on here, as well as my copy of The King Must Die by Mary Renault. That's pretty much it, and then a plushy cat. Cute. So yeah, bonus bookcase.